Okay, everyone. So in this next lesson, let's talk a little bit about PHP. PHP is a server scripting language and a very powerful tool for making dynamic and interactive web pages. It is very widely used. A lot of websites out there are using PHP, and it is an alternative. It can be an alternative to competitors such as Microsoft's ASP. Some things that you should know already before proceeding with PHP will be a little bit of knowledge about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is not going to be an HTML, CSS lesson series, so I won't be too much focused on markup, and CSS will be more on aesthetics. And JavaScript, I would say that if you learn PHP, it's going to be easy for you to also learn JavaScript. And if you started out with JavaScript, it's also going to be easy for you to transition to PHP, because technically these are programming languages, or these are languages that has logic in them, that has similar concepts when it comes to the fundamentals. That's why it's really recommended that if you're going to be learning programming, at least learn 1 to 2 programming language, focus on the fundamentals, learn how to read code base, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to transition to another programming language. You just need to familiarize yourself with some differences with the syntax and how they are written when it comes to the rules and syntax that is needed for creating statements, expressions, and other things that you should be aware of when you're learning some new language. And so I'm expecting that you will be aware of how to use HTML and CSS already, so I won't be tackling too much about them. And as I mentioned, it is free to use. The acronym for PHP is PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. It's open source and it's going to be executed on the server side. So PHP files have file extensions that ends with .php, and it can contain text, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP code. PHP code is executed on the server, and the output is returned to the browser as plain HTML. So something to take note of, if we run .html, or if we can have PHP files inside of a .html, however, they will not be rendered in the browser. So we'll see that in action. We will need to have a web server for us to be able to run PHP code on our browser. So just have that in mind. Now, what are the things that we will need to set up for us to be able to run PHP on our PC? So we will need to install a web server, install PHP, and install a database such as MySQL. So if we go to some of our, let me just go pull up our browser here. So these are some options that you may be able to use. In my case, I'll be using XAMPP. I already have that installed, so perhaps I'll just be leaving a link on how you can install XAMPP into your machine. And you will see it already has MySQL inside of it, so we just need to start the server and also start the MySQL database so that we can try to utilize that for our projects as we try to connect our front end to our back end. And we also have some options like WAMP. I haven't used WAMP personally, but I think this is also another option that you can try to check out. Laragon, I have some bits of experience in utilizing Laragon, but not that deep. I've been using XAMPP or XAMPP for quite some time now, but again, it's not bad to explore. Depending on where you will be, or depending on your team, your company, you might want to use some of these tools for your testing environment as you try to develop your projects. And of course, you will need a code editor. So if you have some background with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, some front-end development background, I'm sure you already have some sort of your text editor of choice. There are some other text editors, but in my case, this is the one that I'm very comfortable with, so this is the one that I'll be using. So if you want to follow along, we can try to you can try to also install Visual Studio Code so that we will be familiarized with how to utilize it while we're working with PHP. And I think that's it for this session. So just have XAMPP installed, and I'll be running it through. I won't be using too much PowerPoint presentations. I'll be trying to tackle the fundamentals and show you on the spot. Just take note, I'm really hoping that you will be patient in our discussions, because I will be starting from scratch. Every time that we will be working with some examples, I will be coding it from scratch, so I won't be we might encounter some debugging in the long run, because I want to also show you how we can try to solve bugs. And most of the time, this is also a big part of development, meaning you don't get to always produce what you want to produce when you're building projects. You encounter errors, and what's really important is you find a solution to that. First, try it out on your own, try to find a way on how to solve a possible error that you're encountering, and of course read some documentation. So it's really, really important that you read documentation. Don't punish yourself if you don't understand a concept at first, because everybody goes through that. If you don't understand something, I would really recommend read whatever concept you're learning. Try to look up the documentation, try to read further some explanations coming from people who has been there before you. So don't punish yourself if you think you're having a difficult time at first, because the more you do this, the more you practice, the brain will be automatically it will at some point be able to realize, oh, okay, so that's how this is working. So just get some rest for a while. If you, for example, you really can't understand one concept, try to get some rest, go out there, go take some quick walk, exercise, or watch a movie perhaps, just to get back on track by means of resting your mind first. And you might not know, in the early in the morning, you get to figure out some things like errors that you're encountering. You get to figure out some solutions to problems that you're encountering. So again, believe in yourself that you can try to accomplish learning the language, and I'm sure you'll be able to get through it, and you'll be able to further improve your understanding of the PHP language. Just some tips: try to read or research first. It's really an important part of development. Research what you're trying to learn, then read it, reread it again. If you don't understand it, reread it again, reread it one more time, reread again the documentation. Of course, it's much better also if you try to execute some code. Just don't execute any code that you don't understand. That's one rule. And one other tip will be to try to explain it in your own words. If you don't understand the concept of if-else statements, what are conditional statements, what are variables, how do you declare a variable, how do you initialize a variable, what's the difference between the two, try to explain it in your own words, and I'm sure at some point it gets to be something that you will be understanding in the long run. And of course, don't be afraid to join communities like Stack Overflow. There are some benefits to joining those communities. You get to find ways on how to solve solutions. You get to find some solutions that have been figured out if you encountered a similar error that you may be encountering right now, and other people may have already found a solution to that. So I would suggest that if you still don't have a Stack Overflow account, you might want to already get started on having a Stack Overflow account, from where you can try to share some information or ask questions from the community. So I hope that this lesson gave you some ideas and tips, and thank you for your time, and see you on our next lesson.